What happens when a routine flight turns into a nightmare? On May 22, 2020, Pakistan Airlines Flight 8303 faced a catastrophic combination of a gear-up landing and dual-engine failure, leading to a tragic crash. But how did this happen despite the advanced warning systems and strict protocols in modern aviation? Well, stick around as we unravel the shocking series of events that led to one of the most harrowing aviation disasters in recent history. On May 22, 2020, Pakistan Airlines Flight 8303 set out on what was supposed to be a routine domestic flight from Lahore to Karachi. The Airbus A320, carrying 91 passengers and 8 crew members, departed in the early afternoon, ready to complete the 90-minute journey. This flight, however, was anything but ordinary. It took place during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. Strict lockdowns were in place, and this flight was among the few still operating. Adding to the complexity, it was also the holy month of Ramadan. Many of the crew members were fasting, abstaining from food and water from dawn till dusk, which undoubtedly affected their physical and mental state. Now, let's meet the pilots in command. The captain, a 58-year-old veteran, had been with Pakistan International Airlines for over 24 years. With more than 17,250 flight hours under his belt, including nearly 4,800 hours on the Airbus A320, he was considered highly experienced. Recently appointed as a standard inspector for the A320 fleet, he was responsible for ensuring that other pilots adhered to operational standards. Beside him sat the first officer, a 33-year-old with significantly less experience. Having joined the airline 10 years prior, he had accumulated just under 2,300 flight hours, with approximately 1,500 of those on the A320. Although he had some negative feedback during his initial training, his record had been clean since 2015. However, the gap in their experience levels created a noticeable power gradient in the cockpit. As the crew prepared for the flight, they conducted their routine checks and briefings, discussing the weather conditions and the flight plan. The weather was generally favorable, with only some thunderstorms expected in Lahore later in the afternoon and clear skies in Karachi. Despite the challenges posed by the pandemic and Ramadan, everything seemed in order for what was supposed to be a straightforward flight. But as we will see, a series of oversights, miscommunications, and procedural breaches would soon turn this routine flight into a devastating tragedy. Pakistan Airlines Flight 8303 began its journey smoothly. At 1:35 p.m. local time, the aircraft started its acceleration down the runway in Lahore. The engines roared to life, and within moments, the Airbus A320 lifted off the ground, climbing steadily towards its cruising altitude. The initial climb was uneventful, with the plane reaching 34,000 feet as planned. As they settled into the cruise phase of the flight, the cockpit atmosphere became more relaxed. The captain and first officer began chatting, their conversation straying far from the operational aspects of the flight. Instead of discussing the flight plan, weather updates, or any potential challenges they might face, their talk revolved around personal topics. They discussed the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on their lives and shared their thoughts on various non-operational matters. Anyway, the flight continued on its path, seemingly normal, but the relaxed environment in the cockpit set the stage for the critical mistakes that would follow. This lack of focus and adherence to standard operating procedures would soon contribute to a series of missteps, turning an otherwise routine flight into a tragic disaster. As Pakistan Airlines Flight 8303 approached Karachi, the crew began their descent without adhering to proper procedures. The first officer, who was the pilot flying, initiated the descent without the necessary coordination and call-outs with the captain. Typically, the descent involves setting the new altitude in the flight control unit and confirming it with the other pilot to ensure accuracy. This crucial step was skipped, creating the first ripple in a series of procedural breaches. During this critical phase, the approach setup was also mishandled. In any flight, preparing for descent and approach involves programming the flight management computer with the arrival route and approach details, followed by a thorough briefing. This preparation ensures both pilots have a shared understanding of the approach path, altitude restrictions, and potential threats. Instead of following this routine, the crew continued their casual conversations, neglecting the necessary briefings and checks.